Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast. The Timberwolves beat the Chicago Bulls by scoring a franchise record 150 points on Sunday. We're going to break down Anthony Edwards' phenomenal game, DAngelo Russell's great game, Nate Knight coming off the bench. There's plenty to talk about. The Wolves scored 150 points. Of course, there's a lot to say. We're going to get into it all right now. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend, and this is a Victory Monday and a game day. The Wolves play again tonight. There's plenty to get to here on the show today. A monster franchise record, 150 points on Sunday. And we're going to, Ant, D'Lo, Nate Knight, just in general, a really impressive Timberwolves performance. First of all, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to the show on any of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch Locked On Sports Minnesota. I should say you should download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku or Amazon Fire TV, and you can watch this show as well as all the other great Locked On Sports shows in Minnesota, Locked On Golden Gophers, Locked On Vikings, Twins, Wild. It's all there. More great local sports coverage 24/7. It's absolutely free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Also, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. And that's with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right. Wolves Bulls. So the Bulls have been disappointing this season, just like the Wolves, but even more so. The Bulls were 11-16 coming into this game. They have had some injury issues, but they were relatively healthy. Obviously missing Lonzo Ball. I almost said LaMelo. Lonzo Ball, but otherwise pretty healthy. Zach LaVine played. DeMar DeRozan played. And this was just a stinker of a game for the Bulls, frankly. They've been struggling a bit lately. But, coming into this game, the Wolves coming off this 5-game road trip with a little bit of momentum following the win Friday night in Oklahoma City, which was a gritty win, a much-needed win, obviously, to cap that difficult road trip. No Rudy Gobert, obviously no Karl-Anthony Towns, no DAngelo Russell on Friday, and no Jerome McLaughlin, no Taurean Prince, missing 5 of their top probably 9 rotation players. And then Monday night, facing a Bulls team with LaVine, with DeRozan, with Vucevic, a healthy Bulls team. And the Timberwolves mostly held the Bulls at arm's length in this game. And to me, the biggest story was that the Wolves played hard from start to finish. There weren't really any lulls in this game. We'll talk about a couple maybe dips that happened, but they played hard pretty much throughout. They pushed the pace offensively. They were running after makes. It was like the complete reverse of so many Wolves games this season where the other team is running after makes and getting easy buckets, just pushing the ball up the floor and taking the ball to the net and just scoring at will. The Wolves did that to the Bulls in this game. They had a big fast break advantage, big transition points advantage in this game. They moved the ball from side to side on offense. The Timberwolves, not only did they score a franchise record 150 points, they had a season high 23 made threes in this game. And that was mostly a result, not that many threes came in transition. That was mostly a result of just moving the ball from side to side, keeping the defense's feet moving. This is, again, the reverse of what we've said so often about the Wolves this year. Minnesota can play decent one-on-one defense. They've got enough good one-on-one talent. They've got a backline rim protector typically, and Rudy Gobert obviously didn't play in this game. But the interior defense has been good. The paint defense has been good. The perimeter defense, minus pick and roll point of attack defense. But on-ball isolation defense has generally been okay for Minnesota for most of this year. If the opponent is simply playing isolation and not really running a set at all. But if the ball moves side to side and the Wolves are forced into a couple of rotations and they're having to move their feet a little bit, you can beat them on the second or third time the ball swings around the perimeter. That's what the Wolves did to the Bulls in this game. And frankly, many NBA teams can be can be beaten that way, right? But so few NBA offenses lack the patience to actually get that good shot, to keep the ball moving until they get the wide open shot, or until they get, the defender leaning the wrong way, or just a half step behind the rotation, and then you jet to the, straight line drive to the rim and score. The Wolves did that to the Bulls in this game pretty much at will. And we'll talk about some individual efforts. DAngelo Russell was a monster early in this game. He made 7 of his first 8 threes, was just completely unstoppable. Anthony Edwards, really the middle part of the game, and I guess the fourth quarter, but he picked it up as the game went along, found his shot, and was also unstoppable. But those two in particular, they combined to really be the straw that stirs the drink for the Wolves between the two of them. And the Bulls, made things. And the Bulls are not a bad defensive team generally. They were 9th in defensive rating coming into this game. So it's not like they're a bottom 10 defense, bottom 5 defense, or anything like that. This was a solid defensive team that just didn't feel like they had it tonight. They didn't really compete. The Bulls didn't really get back defensively at all. Like I said, they're very slow in their rotations. The Wolves, just by making the Bulls move their feet, were able to get really whatever they wanted offensively. It's the exact opposite. Exactly flipped from what we've seen for so much of this season. Finally, it was the Wolves with ridiculous shooting numbers, good ridiculous shooting numbers in this game. Minnesota shot 65.5% from the field, 53.5% from 3, 23 of 43 from 3, which, by the way, the sheer volume of three-point attempts from Minnesota was so refreshing to see. 43 three-point attempts in this game. And just a couple of games ago against the Clippers, I think they shot 22 or 23 threes, which was down from like 24 threes in the loss right before that. The road trip, in Portland and then, at the Clippers, just the lack of 3-point attempts was really, really tough to watch, because how are you ever going to catch up to teams in today's NBA shooting 23 threes, right? And the Wolves took the threes in this game, and they made threes in this game. With the exception of Kyle Anderson, everyone else that attempted a three-pointer was at or above their season percentage. Kyle Anderson was 0 for 4. I think 3 of the 4 were from the corners, where he's been really good this year, but obviously was shooting above his career average. In fact, this game, Kyle Anderson started regressing to the mean in terms of his career average. We're seeing D'Lo go 7 of 10 from 3, and 4 of 11, which is kind of right in line with where he should be, almost exactly. Austin Rivers, 4 of 6. He's been shooting well below where we'd expect him to shoot from 3. We saw that 3-point percentage individually tick towards where it should be in terms of progressing to the mean. It's been a common theme on this show over the past 3 or 4 weeks that, like, hey, Karl-Anthony Towns Exhibit A, and obviously he's not playing, but these guys aren't all going to continue to shoot well below career averages. It's just not feasible. It's not plausible, right? Like, it's not something that should happen. And finally, we're starting to see an improvement there. And this game was a great example. They also shot 81% from the line. They only had 16 free throw attempts. Surprised the Bulls had 24 when I looked at the box score at the end of the game. It didn't really feel like it. This game had so much flow and so much offense. There were very few rebounds. It felt like not that many fouls in real time. A relatively clean game because the offense was so much better than the defense. And while we're at it, let me touch on the Wolves defensively. Yes, they gave up 126 points. Yes, the Bulls shot 52% from the field. I actually don't think the Wolves were all that awful defensively. I thought the Bulls just played a pretty good offensive game and were just atrocious themselves on defense. The Wolves, I thought, played pretty well on both ends of the floor. Now, obviously, there were some issues, especially early in the game. I thought the first quarter was pretty rough defensively for the Wolves. But after that, I thought Minnesota's defense was pretty good. I didn't really have much of a problem with how the Wolves played on that end of the floor. And Jaden McDaniels in particular was really impressive in this game, had kind of an understated, obviously D'Lo and Ant for all the right reasons. And Nate Knight, we'll talk more about him later, had great games offensively, but Jaden McDaniels, a well-rounded game, 15, 8, and 5, 3 blocks for McDaniels, 6 of 8 shooting, hit a couple of threes, was very good defensively, had a couple impressive blocks down the stretch in this game. So we'll talk more about him later, but throughout the first quarter, I thought the Wolves defense was actually pretty good. Now, the Bulls aren't a great offensive team, but they've got guys who can score, can get their shot off. DeMar DeRozan historically has been great against the Wolves, and he was, the numbers are good in the box score, but it was a pretty ho-hum DeRozan game. Same with Zach LaVine. He did reach 10,000 career points in this game. Congrats to Zach. Love Zach LaVine. But defensively, DeRozan and LaVine were definitely part of the problem for the Bulls. All right. Next, I want to talk about Nate Knight. I want to talk about the Wolves dealing with adversity, in-game adversity, that they've so often struggled with this season. We're going to do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our title sponsors of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. If you took Anthony Edwards points over or Anthony Edwards assists over, he set a career high with 11 assists in this game, then you were in good shape over at Prize Picks tonight. You can pick 2 to 6 players at Prize Picks, and if they'll score more or less than their projections at Prize Picks, and it's not just the obvious categories, it's also three-pointers made and steals and more obscure categories. It's a ton of fun, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. You can also play any sport. So you could have done a cross match sport with NFL Sunday Night Football on Sunday. You could have done something in the Sunday night game along with, say, Anthony Edwards three-pointers over. You can also do college sports, NHL, etc. You can make your entries in less than 60 seconds. It's extremely easy. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B, or test drive that new electric vehicle that you've had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. A big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's talk Nate Knight. This was a really fun Nate Knight game. And actually, let me back up like a half step here. The Nate Knight thing only becomes possible, or I guess it was part of the response to more in-game adversity for the Wolves. And we talked about this throughout the season. Marnie Gellner and I have talked about it in the live postcast a lot. Like the macro picture is the Wolves have really struggled with dealing with adversity, and that's still the case. But even within games, early in the season, when I think everybody was a bit more optimistic about where this team was headed early in the season, with an easier schedule, there were in-game issues, foul trouble, technical fouls, flagrant fouls, guys getting hurt in-game, and the Wolves just weren't dealing well with the in-game adversity. They had a lot of it in this game, and they responded extremely well. And I think this is a sign of progress, certainly for the Wolves. So Naz Reid actually gets the start. Of course, no Towns, no Gobert. Gets off to a great start. He had a great game in Oklahoma City on Friday. We didn't cover that game. We didn't do the live postcast, and it was, we didn't have the full post-game pod either. But he had a great game in Oklahoma City. And then gets the start on Monday against the Bulls. A tough matchup against Vucevic. Goes out, scores the Wolves' first 10 points of the game. Gets off to a great start, hits a couple of threes, and then leaves with a shoulder injury. No idea what his status is now. Marnie said of the postcast, it didn't look great, but who knows? Maybe Rudy's back Monday, and the Wolves don't need to rush Naz back. No idea on the severity of the injury at this point. But he only plays the first quarter and doesn't come back in. We see Luka Garza as the first big off the bench, which seemed a little bit weird because Nate Knight played so well on Friday in Oklahoma City, and Garza didn't play at all. And then Garza actually had a pretty miserable first stint. Calling it like I see it, he did not play well in his first stint in the game. Gave up an and one, had another bad foul, had a couple of rough offensive possessions. Garza doesn't play well. Knight comes in. It's absolutely Nate Knight to the rescue. Competes on the glass. I know he only had 2 boards in this game, but I thought Knight was physical in the paint, set really physical screens. I think got called for 1 offensive foul, but physical screens. He's not as big as Rudy Gobert, and I'm not going to say that Nate Knight's as good of a screener as Rudy Gobert because Gobert is arguably the best in the game. But Knight was setting really strong screens in this game and got a couple of massive dunks out of it. One two-handed dunk he took off from the dotted line. I mean, he had not consecutive possessions, but pretty close together. 2 big dunks on dives to the rim on, I believe, both DAngelo Russell passes in that second quarter. But all game long, when Knight was in the game, and he started the second half because Naz didn't come back. So Knight was the primary center in this game with Garza as his backup. And by the way, Garza played better in the second half in his second stint. But Knight was phenomenal. Was, again, physical on the glass in the paint, battled, which is what we saw in Oklahoma City on Friday. He was really good against the Thunder, very physical. We saw that again on Monday against the Bulls, and that is what on this show I've talked about Nate Knight. I said actually back when Towns first got hurt, I was hoping this would open the door for more Nate Knight. I think he's an NBA caliber rotation guy. He should be a third, fourth big in a rotation. I thought that was his role after last year. I was surprised nobody else picked him up in free agency. This might be his opportunity. This looks like his opportunity. If Rudy Gobert doesn't play Monday, then Nate Knight's your guy. Even if Gobert plays, he's your primary backup. He has to have earned those minutes over Luka Garza. And Knight was phenomenal in this game. What did he put up? 16, I believe. 16 points. Yeah, 16 points on 8 shots, 6 of 8 shooting, knocked down a corner 3 in the second half. Was short on a straightaway 3 that looked like it was a shot he can make. 3 of 3 at the line, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 turnover. Was a +8 in 26 minutes. A great game for Nate Knight. And without Nate Knight, I mean, I'm sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure. I think the Wolves still win this game if he just has an okay performance. But for him to come up big in that second quarter, the Wolves were actually losing at the end of the first quarter of this game, 34-32. I talked in the first segment about how the defense wasn't very good in the first quarter. Knight's physicality, I think, played into the defense improving in the second quarter. And at that moment in the game, the Wolves were like neck and neck with the Bulls, and they needed that push, that shot in the arm from Nate Knight. He gave them that in the second quarter. The Wolves scored 39 in the frame and ended up being up 6 points at halftime and then up 16 at the end of the third quarter. And Knight was a massive part of that. I can't sing his praises enough, and he better, even if Rudy's back, Knight better get some serious run on Monday night because he played extremely well in this game. Another thing I thought was, I have two more takeaways. The Bulls went to zone a few times in this game. Third quarter, we saw it a little bit in the fourth quarter, and another recurring theme of this season so far is the Wolves' inability to deal with zone defenses. And the Bulls don't play a lot of zone, but they tried it in this game, and the Wolves, they completely destroyed it. We saw a couple nice baseline cuts, beautiful passing from DAngelo Russell, Kyle Anderson, others finding soft spots, kind of right around that 10, 12 foot mark away from the rim, soft spots in the zone, hitting little mid-range jumpers. And then also just making open threes. The Wolves did those things. That's how you beat a zone, right? You can cut against the zone. You can find the soft spots and either shoot or hit cutters, or you just make open 3-pointers. The Wolves have failed to do the first two things entirely, not understood how to drive against the zone, how to cut against the zone. That hasn't been a thing all year against the zone for the Wolves. They did that in this game. They've been taking threes against the zone. They've just been missing them all season, which is the number one reason why they've struggled against it, because it's the easiest way to beat a zone. The Wolves made those open threes in this game. I already gave the numbers earlier, but they were 53.5% from three. And anytime the Bulls went to a zone, the Wolves completely ate it up. And I thought that was really solid progress for Minnesota. We've seen that a little bit more lately, and we might be to the point where teams are starting to use the zone not just as a changeup against the Wolves. It was kind of like, hey, we're going to do this a big chunk of the time and see what happens. Philadelphia was a great example of that going back a couple of weeks. But now that the Wolves are starting to beat it, maybe it becomes more of a changeup again, which is how most NBA teams use the zone, because again, the zone shouldn't be that hard to beat for professional basketball players. But if you don't see it very often, you can forget what you're supposed to do. It completely could throw you off for at least a possession or two. And you could essentially, it's a way that opposing coaches use the zone to steal possessions, right? And that may always be the case, but it at least isn't a viable defense to play regularly against the Wolves if they can do what they did against the Bulls. And I thought that was impressive. The last thing would be, and I talked about this with Marnie on the postcast, one of the unintended benefits, I guess unintended benefit may not be the right way to say it, because nothing about the fact that McLaughlin's out and Cat's out is positive, but you go a couple layers here, and Anthony Edwards is getting forced to initiate more offense, to actually not just initiate offense, but play point guard. And long-term, this could be really good for both the team and also Ant's individual career development. On Friday in Oklahoma City, there was no DAngelo Russell, right? So Austin Rivers started at point guard, Anthony Edwards, but Rivers ran a lot of the offense. In this game, even with D'Lo on the floor, Anthony Edwards was running the offense. He ran the second team offense for long chunks of the game. Rivers was giving Edwards the ball, and Edwards was the one bringing the ball up the floor. It wasn't Rivers dribbling it up, getting the team into the offense, and then Ant operating within pick and roll. This was Ant actually running the offense, truly playing point guard, and he was really good. I didn't do a live postcast on Friday. I was a little hard on Ant on Twitter, maybe unnecessarily. I thought there were some sloppy Ant possessions Friday. And overall, he played very well against Oklahoma City. Closed the game phenomenally, had that big block on SGA. But there were some rough moments initiating offense. There were very few of those in this game, maybe a couple early. I think there was one bad turnover. Like the fact that I can really kind of pinpoint those moments means that Ant was really good in this game. And the bigger picture look at this is when Cat's back, you're going to run a lot of the offense through Cat. That's just how it works. He's your best, most efficient offensive player. Rudy Gobert, TBD on exactly how the Wolves figure that whole thing out. But, there's been flashes, and Ant and Rudy, I think, more recently showed some flashes of figuring it out. And maybe this opportunity for Ant to work with non-Rudy bigs will give him an appreciation for Rudy, his wingspan, his ability as a roller, as diving to the rim in that role. And perhaps Ant and Rudy can continue to work on their chemistry, and maybe Edwards is becoming more confident initiating offense during this period of time. But ultimately, long-term, all of this should make Anthony Edwards a better overall all-around basketball player, and certainly, lead guard, right? If he's ever going to consistently, I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be like Donovan Mitchell or James Harden and basically run the entire offense, but maybe he could be, right? I mean, teams are starting to defend him. Like we saw this on, was it Wednesday against the Clippers last week? The Clippers defended him like he was Harden or Luka Doncic or Donovan Mitchell, where they basically tried to double him at the top of the key, which is, you don't do that to many guys, and the Wolves didn't have anyone else, and that's why they got away with it. But that could be the type of player Ant becomes if he can just improve that efficiency and obviously the court vision and the passing ability offensively. So overall, that could be a silver lining to this period of time for the Wolves and for Anthony Edwards specifically. All right, let's close the show by doing individual studs and duds. We're going to do that here next. First, though, today's episode is brought to us by our friends at ExpressVPN. So we all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online. But here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix, and this will change your world. For instance, ExpressVPN allows you to binge, say, The Office on UK Netflix. It's so simple to do. Just sign into Netflix, fire up the ExpressVPN app, change your location to the UK, refresh Netflix, and that's it. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries, so just imagine all the Netflix libraries you can go through. For instance, if you love Korean dramas, you can use ExpressVPN to Parasite off of South Korean Netflix with your Netflix subscription. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service, Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason to use ExpressVPN to watch shows is because it's ridiculously fast. There's never any buffering or lag. You can stream in HD, no problem. ExpressVPN also works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more, so you can watch what you want on the big screen or on the go. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now. You can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon, expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. All right, let's close this thing out by talking studs and duds, as we always do on the postgame pod. Anthony Edwards, obviously a stud in this game. 37 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds, shot 13 of 25, better than 50% from the floor, 4 of 11 on threes, which, by the way, do the math there. That means he was 9 of 14 on twos. Fantastic. 7 of 7 at the line, which is good to see because Ant has struggled at the free throw line the last couple times out. Uncharacteristically, of course. He's a good free throw shooter. So it's good to see him get back on track there. 11 assists to 4 turnovers, 2 steals in this game for Ant. He was a plus 15 in 38 minutes. And, outside of real early in the game, like basically mid-second quarter-ish or so, ballpark, through the end of the game, Ant was phenomenal. He had that big steal at the end of the third quarter, that kind of runner from the right wing right as the buzzer went off in the third after the steal, right after he had a bad turnover just prior to that. The Wolves had held for the final shot. Ant turned it over and then stole the inbound pass and hit that three. This was a fun game for me. It had the windmill dunk at the end of the game. Had another dunk where he just overpowered Caruso, got to the rim and dunked on the Bulls. This was a ton of fun and exactly what we need to see out of Anthony Edwards on a regular basis. And no Cat, no Rudy. was about time we saw this Anthony Edwards. We talked a lot about him last night, but there's not much else to say. He was really, really good. DAngelo Russell was probably actually all the way around the Timberwolves' best player in this game. I thought he was every bit as big as Ant was, because he was the one that when the Wolves were actually trailing early in the second quarter, it was D'Lo that was the one that was keeping the Wolves afloat, and it got them ahead. He had 28 points in this game on 10 of 14 shooting, 7 of 10 outside the arc, 3 of 4 on twos, and 8 assists to 3 turnovers, only 3 turnovers, had a couple of rebounds. He was a shocking plus 33 in this game, a plus 33. The Wolves won by 24. D'Lo was a plus 33 in 37 minutes. Just fantastic. Could not miss early, hit a crazy shot clock beating 3-pointer from like the middle of, well, not the middle of the logo, but like it wasn't the edge of the center court logo. Now it was a bit of an oversized logo with the alternate court, but it was like a couple feet into the logo at center court to beat the shot clock in the first quarter. And then from that point on, he knew he was hot. He hit a mid-range jumper right after that, just past the free throw line, then hit a couple of threes. He hit 7 of his first 8 threes, missed a couple late, but a really good all-around game from D'Lo. He continues, like if you watch him, like if you watch the game right now and just watch D'Lo for his 37 minutes, watch this game, and then went back and watched like a random late October, early November game and watched D'Lo, just kept a camera on him the entire game, I guarantee you, and we could actually probably look at this on the player tracking, how many miles he's running or whatever per game, whatever that stat is, the actual distance ran. He certainly is playing harder, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Go back and watch that. Watch how hard he's hustling defensively, going for loose balls or not going for loose balls more accurately back in October, early November to right now, mid-December. D'Lo is hustling. If he turns it over, if he misses a shot, he's sprinting back defensively. He's covering for teammates. He's competing defensively for the most part, and actually been a really, really good player for the last few weeks. And that was not the case early this season. It's going to be real interesting. This is completely another conversation for another day, because if the Wolves right the ship, this isn't a conversation. But if the Wolves hover around 500 and, whatever, D'Lo, that expiring contract, he may have trade value now. There was that Miami Heat rumor late last week, I think it was, so that the Heat are discussing DAngelo Russell as a trade possibility. We're going to start hearing a lot of that now that we're past that December 15th deadline, and you've got the January 15th deadline upcoming when everybody else becomes trade eligible, I think, basically. We're going to hear a little bit of this, but like if they choose to trade him, like if D'Lo plays like this, who wouldn't want D'Lo on their team? He was phenomenal in this game. Really, really good. My last stud is Jaden McDaniels. And honestly, like we could go Nate Knight. I already kind of sung his praises. Screw it. Let's go 4 stars in this game. We'll talk about Jaden first. 15 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks for Jaden McDaniels, a plus 31 in 34 minutes, 6 of 8 shooting, 2 of 3 outside the arc. Great defensively. I know that the Bulls, like they got what they wanted pretty much. Like DeRozan was 50% better than 50% for the field, 29 and 6. Levine was 50% for the field at 22 and 6. But I thought Jaden McDaniels competed defensively, had a couple really big blocks, and was efficient offensively. He did what the Wolves needed him to do. The 15, 8, 5, and 3 blocks, like that's what you need from Jaden McDaniels on a nightly basis. If you could do something like that, then he's exactly what the Wolves thought he was when they refused to trade him in the Rudy Gobert trade. This was a great game from him. Nate Knight, we talked a lot about, but I got to give him a stud. You got to show Nate Knight love. 16 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists for Knight. Had a couple of really nice instinctual passes. I should have mentioned this earlier, but he had one. I forget who the initial ball handler was, but the ball got dumped off to Knight, and Knight kind of shovel passed it to somebody that was in the cutting baseline for the Wolves. I think it might have been McDaniels. Just a great play. And the sort of instinctual pass, like we don't see that necessarily from Nas. Towns has kind of gotten there now. Rudy's more of like as he's rolling, kicks it to the corner. That's kind of his move. But if he gets the ball down there, the passing isn't always quite there for Rudy. This was just a really good instinctual basketball play from Nate Knight. We saw a lot of that in this game. I thought he was really, really good. Duds in this game, I don't know, really hard to come up with one. Like Kyle Anderson didn't 2 points on 1 of 6, missed all 4 threes, and had 5 fouls in 21 minutes. I guess he's the de facto dud. Like if I'm going to name one, he, I guess, didn't play well. It was a minus 17 in 21 minutes. Got into that foul trouble early, had some issues. So I guess he is the dud. He did have 3 assists, a steal, a block. He generally is a pretty solid all-around contributor. This was not that game for Kyle Anderson. He was the only Timberwolves player that played besides Austin Rivers, who is a -1, that had a negative plus minus. And all the caveats apply. Individual game, single game plus minus doesn't mean a whole lot, but still a -17 in 21 minutes is alarming in a game you win by 24. By the way, Austin Rivers, that wasn't a dig at him. I thought he played well in this game. He hit 4 threes. And after having that roller coaster game Friday where he played well, but was on battled with the officials all night long on Friday, this was, I thought, a good game to build on for Austin Rivers, or a good building forward from Friday's game for Austin Rivers. I thought that this game kind of did that, right? This was a good next step for Austin Rivers in a Wolves uniform. So all that to say, great all-around effort for the Wolves. Fantastic win. Franchise record 150 points. Season high 23 made threes. Career high 11 assists for Anthony Edwards. Ant and D'Lo combined to shoot 23 of 39 from the game and 11 of 21 from the free throw line, or 3-point line, excuse me. Just a really great win with no Rudy, no Cat, no Prince, no McLaughlin, injured Naz Reid. We'll see who all is available Monday. There's always a chance that Naz Reid isn't available. If he left the game with the shoulder, there's a chance Rudy's back at what was described a mild ankle sprain. He's already missed 2 games. My guess, I'm completely guessing, but maybe Rudy's back Monday and Naz is out. We'll see. But we'll get to see some more Nate Knight, which will be good. So we'll see. Dallas Mavericks, by the way, also 15-15. They lost a tough overtime game to the Cavs on Saturday with no Luka Doncic. Doncic is, at this point, while I'm recording this Sunday night, is questionable for Monday's game against the Wolves. So no Doncic. The Wolves should be favored at home against a team with the same record as them. But we'll see if Luka plays. Obviously, all bets are off. Things are different. But intriguing matchup, and this is the consecutive games against the Mavs situation. So we'll see the Mavs again on Wednesday. Not previewing Monday's game really at all. We haven't seen the Mavs, I don't think, at all this year. But we'll unpack Monday's game, and then we'll look ahead to Wednesday and maybe break down the Mavs a little bit more as a team in between those 2 games. So a big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, you can watch on YouTube and listen on any of your favorite audio platforms. You can find the show. You can also download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV to watch this show, as well as all the other great Locked On Minnesota programs. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. That's with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. The Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, that your local experts on all the biggest stories. A reminder, you can make your second listen to Locked On Sports Today show. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.